Well, hey there everyone, welcome back to Stuff in Excel. I'm Richard. What I want to do is share with you 6 what I call tips and tricks about pivot tables, ways you can improve your pivot tables, some cool things you can do with them, and at the end I'm going to show you one bonus pivot table trick that I think you're really going to like. So let's just get into it. So let's start with this data file. This file is available. If you go down to the description section of the video, you will see a link to this Excel file and you can download it and you can follow along with the video. So the first thing we want to do is recognize first that this is already in a table format. We want to make it into a pivot table. Now, Excel's a little strange because sometimes they use words that sound similar, right? So a table of data is different from a pivot table, and we're going to take this table and turn it into a pivot table. Now, all I have to do is click anywhere within the table, and it will recognize the entire range of data. So I'll click here, then I'm going to go up to Insert. If you go up to the top ribbon, you can see where I've got Insert. I'm going to click on Insert, and then on the far left, we're going to go to Pivot Table. So I'll click on Pivot Table, and it tells me I'm going to use Table 4 because that's the name of that table. I'm going to put it on a new worksheet, and then we'll hit OK. So I'll hit that, and there we go. So we've got our pivot table screen set up, but we haven't actually done any tables yet. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to drag customer ID down to my rows, and I'm going to drag sales down to values. And so we can see for every customer number over here on the left, and I'm over here on the far left side of the screen right now, for every one of those customer numbers, we can see that we now have amount of sales. Now, the first tip about these pivot tables is that we can drill down on any item that's in a pivot table to the detail. So for example, if I went to customer number 2 and I double-clicked or clicked on that, I'm going to double-click, it's going to open up detail about customer 2. It tells me the date of the transaction, the customer ID, what they bought, the sales tax, and the net sales. So I can find that out. I can go back. So now it creates, anytime you do this, it'll create a new sheet at the bottom. So I can simply delete that sheet. And I'll delete it, and now I'll go back to look at another sale. So let's go down here and look at customer number, let's say customer 7. Let's see how many sales they had. Customer 7 had 2 sales with us, or 2 purchases. We sold 2 things to them, and it tells us we bought some fishing equipment and some yard games. I go back to my tab 3. I can go down, let's say customer 13. They had 5 transactions with us, so we can drill down into the date. So that's the first tip, that we can drill down on anything that's in a pivot table. We can drill down to the underlying detail. Remember, pivot tables summarize information based on what you told it to summarize. So we told it to summarize based on customer ID. And so now we can drill down into sales to the details of each one of those items. So the next thing I want to show you with pivot tables is that we can reconfigure our pivot table fields box over here on the far right. So if you go to the little gear up here that's in this box, I can go down, and one of the options it gives me is to change the way these field boxes are set up. So right now they're set up in pretty standard configuration. This is what you usually see. I could change that to make it look this way. Particularly if I had a whole lot of fields down here, and I wanted to just show them over here, I could do that. Another thing I've got that I can do is I can change it to just fields only, or I could change it to the area sections only. So you can do a number of different things with the pivot field table box so far as configuring that and changing the way it looks to suit you better. Now, the third tip I want to show you has to do with our values. So if you click on this, if you look down here right now, you can see down here at the bottom, what we're looking at is sum of sales. So what it's telling us for each one of these, and this box is in the way, so let me move this box. It's telling us that when we clicked on sales, we're seeing the sum of sales for each customer. Maybe that's not what we really wanted to know. Maybe what we really want to know is how many sales we have for customers. Well, pivot tables gives us the option of changing the setting on this value. So we click on the down arrow, And one of the things we're going to do is go to Value Field Settings. And when we do that, it gives us a number of things. Right now it's on Sum of Sales. I could just go to Count. It could be Max Sale, Minimum Sale. But let's just click on Count and watch how it's going to change our pivot table over on the left. When I hit OK, now what I see for each one of my customers is I see the number of sales for that customer. And if I wanted to drill down, I can still drill down and get the original detail that I was looking for earlier. So for instance, if I click on this is going to be customer 99. I double click on count of sales. Now what I get is I get the detail for that customer, for those sales, but I didn't have to hunt for which ones had multiple sales. I could tell based on the count of sales which customers had just one purchase from us and which customers had multiple purchases from us. And this tool allows me to go in and find that information really, really easily. Now, the next thing I want to show you, still over here in the field table, pivot table fields box, is we can add other items down here under rows and values for that matter. I could add, for instance, under values, I could go ahead and add not only sales, but I could add net sales. And let's say I want to change that to, so what I've got for each customer now is I've got the number of sales they had, and I've got the total sales for that customer. So if I double click on, let's go back down and double click on the same person again on the 5 sales, I can see what my 5 sales are that make up that total amount of sales for that particular customer. So I can add things underneath the field, the pivot table fields. I can do the same thing if I added down here item number down under rows. It's going to change it. So now for each customer, you can see I can see for each customer not only how many sales they have, but what kinds of things they purchased. So that is also another tip that we can use where we can add additional items. And you can actually move these around. So if I wanted this by item, I put item first and then customer ID. Now what it's going to do, it's going to show me for each item, it's going to show me what happened. If I scroll way down to where I've got multiple items, because it's going to put them in size order. So I go down here, I've got, for example, snow skis. I had all these different customers buy snow skis. So that's kind of interesting, right? So I can reorganize this data simply by the order in which I put it in my pivot table field. Now, the next thing is a little bit more, I don't want to say esoteric, but it does provide us some information. So what I've got here, or actually, let me go back and we'll go back up to the top. And where we had multiple of these things. So for example, we've got customer 1 had 1 item, but down here we have customer 10 has several items, right? And you see a subtotal for that. Well, it's kind of weird that the subtotal is at the top of the column rather than the bottom of the column, but we can change that. So if we go up here to the top of the screen, and we look at design and click on it, it's going to bring up this box, and we have a couple of things we can do. So the first thing we do, we can adjust these subtotals. We can not show them at all. We can show them at the bottom, or we can show them at the top of the group. Right now they're showing at the top of the group. I'd rather show them at the bottom of the group. That's going to make a whole lot more sense to me. Here's, for instance, customer 5. Here's the 5 items they bought, and here's the subtotal for customer 5. They bought a total of 4. We'll get over here in a minute. They bought a total of 4 items, right? So, so that's what we have here. It allows us to move these subtotals around. Likewise, let me show you this. If we go all the way to the bottom of this thing, you can see it's got a grand total down here at the bottom. Sometimes you may not want to show that grand total because it may be causing you a problem in computations that you're doing. You can turn that off as well. You can simply go to grand totals and you can turn it off for rows and columns. You turn it off, and if you want to, all you got to do is go back up here and you can turn it back on again. No problem. So that was off, now it's back on. So that's another tip that you can do. Finally, I want to show you about slicers and timelines. Now, I've got a separate video that goes deeper into slicers and filters for you. But I wanted to show you slicers and timelines anyway as a neat tool that you can add to your pivot tables. So if we've got this pivot table here, and I'm going to actually take items out of this and make this a little bit smaller again. And I'm going to change this back to sum of sales just because I think it looks cooler. So now what I can do, I can add in some slicers to this. So if I go up here to pivot table, you'd think it'd be under pivot table design, wouldn't you? But it's not. It's under pivot table analyze, which I don't really understand. If you're inserting slicers or timelines, why aren't those under the design category? But they're not. So I can go insert slicer. And I click on that, and it asks me what I want to do a slicer for. So let's do a slicer by item. Let's just do it by customer ID. I don't know why. We'll just do it that way. Do customer ID, and I'll hit OK. So it's going to bring up a box. Now, this box shows me all of my customers, and it goes way down. I can go all the way down to the last customer. It shows me all of my customers, and I can now select to look just at each individual. If I want to look at customer 1, I can do that. And actually, it's not showing me here because I'm way at the bottom of my screen. So now I can click on it. I can bring them all back by clicking on the filter. So now it's at the top of my screen. So I can look at customer 1. If I wanted to, I could look at customer 4. I could look at customer 4 and 5 if I wanted to do that. I could look at customer 8. I could go all the way down and look at customer 1,678. And it's going to give me the sum of sales. And I can still drill down on that data if I wish. Now, another type of, let's go back and add these. Now, if you click on this little filter here that's got the X on it, brings everything back. Now, I can also add what we call a timeline. So if I go back to click on my pivot table, I'm going to go to pivot table analyze. I'm going to add a timeline. Timeline is a special kind of filter or special kind of slicer that I put in, and it's based on dates. So in this time, we only have one date. You might have some kind of transactions where you have multiple dates in there. You might have date of transaction, date the transaction is due, the date that the transaction was billed. You might have several different dates in there. We've just got one date in this one, but when I click on create this timeline, it's going to create this timeline here, and I can use this timeline to show which data I wanted. I may just want to show data for, I don't know, let's just say data for June. Okay, and it's going to show me just the data for June. I might just want to see the data, maybe I just want to see the data for customer 1669 for June, maybe for July. There doesn't seem to be any there, right? Maybe for August, September, October, November, December. I'm not even sure where this particular transaction was. It's January, February. I can make this. By the way, I can resize this particular box. So I can show all the months. It looks like this person had one sale and it was in February. Okay. Let's say if I go back up to the top and I went down here to, and let's say I go down in my slicer to, I don't know. Let's go to customer, I think it was 13 that had multiple transactions. Let's go see, is that right? No. Let's find one with multiple transactions. Actually, I don't know which ones have multiple transactions. So we can go up here and I can see where their transactions were. So they obviously had something in February. They have something in January. They had nothing in March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So I can do that. I can show a slicer for just the months of June through November if I wanted to. But the timeline is really useful because it allows you to manipulate which data you're showing by date. So it's a really useful tool to add to any of your pivot tables. So hopefully that was helpful. There's one more bonus item I want to show you, and it's not actually in the desktop version of Excel. It's a special tool that's available in Microsoft Office 365, and I want to show you that one as well. So I am now in Microsoft Office 365, which is the online subscription service for Excel. There's always going to be features that come out in Microsoft Office 365 before they're available in the desktop version of Excel. Now there's a new version of Excel coming out in fall of 2024, and that version should have this tool in it. But in the meantime, where you find this particular tool is in Microsoft Office 365, and it's going to be found up here under the Data tab, and it's going to be over here to the right, and it's called Analyze Data. This is a artificial intelligence tool that takes the data that you identify, the data range that you identify, and it goes ahead and presents to you a selection of charts and tables that you might want to use. So let me go show you how this works. So I'm going to highlight my data for this particular exercise. And once I've highlighted the data, I go to the Data tab, and I'm going to click on Analyze Data. Now over on the right, it's going to give me a selection of different types of charts that it might want to. Maybe you want to know the frequency of the amount of tax. Maybe you want to know which payee is more frequent than others. It's going to give me, it tells me down here at the very bottom, you can see there's 21 total results, and it's only showing me 3 or 4 of them. But if I click on this, it's going to show me all of them, and I can start to look. There's a scatter chart. Here's a line chart. It gives me this, that's for amount of sales. It's going to show me here amount of sale has outliers. It dates January 5th, so it's going to show me that chart. It's got all these different charts it can show me. In addition, if you don't see a chart that you want or need, and by the way, all you have to do is click on Insert Pivot Chart, and it will give you that particular pivot chart, or in this case, a pivot table you can insert. But you can go up here and you can ask it a question. Maybe what I want to know is, I want to know sales for Baskin Robbins. And it's going to give me the amount of sales for Baskin Robbins. Maybe I want the sales for Kroger. It'll just give me that. So it's going to tell me what I need to know based on what I ask it. So it not only has these suggested tables, but it provides a natural language tool for you to ask Excel to give you the analysis that you're actually looking for. I found often that these recommendations that it gives you sometimes are useful, sometimes aren't. What I really like is this natural language tool where I can go and tell it precisely what I want. Now there's another way to do this, and that is to go over to highlight your data, then go under Insert and go to Pivot Table. Now it's going to also, when you go to Pivot Table from Range, it's going to give you some options down here at the bottom. Now it doesn't give you many, but it gives you a few. But one of the options it gives you is to create a new sheet. This is sort of a new version of this Insert Pivot Table. Not only can you create a pivot table from scratch, which you simply go to insert one on a new sheet, which would give you this screen right here, which we're used to seeing, right? But in addition, what it's going to do when we go back to this is it gives me some other suggested pivot tables that would go ahead and be pre-set up. For instance, I could click this one here, and I can insert this onto a new sheet, and it gives me that pivot table. But I can still go in and decide, well, maybe I don't want sum of total receipt. Maybe what I want is, I'll take that off, and I'll put in total amount of sale or tax. Okay, so I can still change it, but it starts me off with a pivot table already constructed. So that's a really, really powerful tool that's coming to the desktop version, but it's already in Excel 365. Well, hopefully this was really helpful. Gives you some other ideas of things you can do with pivot tables. We'll see you real soon on Stuff in Excel.